91.3 WLRN presents Topical Currents. This hour we focus on Miami-Dade government and review its update of the Comprehensive Development Master Plan. Good afternoon, Joseph Cooper and Bonnie Berman. We'll discuss the Evaluation and Appraisal Report, which acronyms to EAR. By state law, the report is generated every 7 years. It seeks to engage county residents for input about growth and priorities. 3 public hearings concerning EAR were held in June. Now, other outreach components are underway. There's an EAR2018 website where residents may list their priorities on numerous items, all of which should be consistent with the county's master plan. That's up next. First, NPR and regional news. Joseph Cooper and Bonnie Berman. It's today's Topical Currents, Monday edition. Well, this hour is devoted to Miami-Dade County and its Comprehensive Development Master Plan Review and Update. The process is known as EAR. That's an acronym for Evaluation and Appraisal Report.
It's done every 7 years by state requirement. There's a multifaceted effort for public input to the process, which we're here to discuss with 3 top Miami-Dade administrators.
First, we have Jerry Bell, who's an assistant director of the Miami-Dade Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources in the Planning Division. Welcome to you, Mr. Bell.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Another guest is Catherine Hagaman. She's the program manager of the Miami-Dade Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources in the Office of Resilience. Thank you for coming, Catherine.
And thanks for having me.
And completing the panel is Aileen Bouclé, the executive director of the Miami-Dade Metropolitan Planning Organization. We've seen her several times recently. Welcome back.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I think what we all want to know, what I want to know, is how much input and, more importantly, how much impact we, the public, can actually have on this comprehensive master plan. And we'll start with you, Jerry Bell.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very important for us because this is really our opportunity to go into the plan and make sure that it's really working for the community, that it's addressing the major issues. So we've tried to start off with a very robust public input process. We held a series of workshops back in June. We also have a survey online that's going to be online through the end of this year. You can get to that by Googling, I think, Miami-Dade EAR2018. So we're trying to get as much input as possible. We will continue to look at ways to reach out to the community and to get as much input that kind of direct us through this process as we move forward.
And how much impact does the public's opinions have or their input?
Very, very much. We're really trying to listen very closely, trying to make sure that we're getting as much input on these issues as we move forward, and we'll look for ways throughout the process to pull them in.
And what came out of the public hearings in June?
Okay, the public workshops in June were great. We had 6 workshops held throughout the county. Got a lot of great input on some of the major issues that we're facing. A lot of ideas regarding transportation, mobility, housing concerns, a lot of issues regarding the environment, how we address growth in the county, our urban development boundary. So a real robust discussion on the issues. And if you go to the website, we've summarized all the comments, and you can basically see all the various input that we received.
How much turnout was there? I mean, has there been a groundswell of civic engagement here?
Right. Well, it's always difficult with the comprehensive plan because a lot of people don't really, it's a very important document, but a lot of people don't really understand it or understand why it's important, because it basically really sets the stage for everything else the county does. There's land development regulations, it's development and redevelopment, it's capital planning. Yeah, it's everything. So it's an important project, but a lot of people don't really understand it because it's not as involved in the day-to-day planning issues. For example, what's happening in the street. It's more of a big picture planning document. So, but we actually had a very good turnout. It depended on the, we had some that had a nice turnout, 30-40. We had some that were, that had less of a turnout. But we've really tried to make an effort to get the word out there, and we'll continue to do so. We've gotten a great response in the survey as well.
I guess that's why I'm asking about the impact, because I think people don't think they can really make a difference.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, and we're really, I think in terms of the report, we really, we're trying to build it on a lot of public input and collaboration. So we really, when I say that we take the input very seriously, we do. It's really going to drive our analysis of the issues. It's going to drive the recommendations that we're eventually going to come up with. So this is really an opportunity to take a look at what kind of community you want Miami-Dade County to be, not only now, but in the future. This is a long-range planning document, so it's a 20-year planning horizon. So what do we really need to look at? What are the big major issues that we need to focus on, and what kind of solutions do people think would make a difference?
And Catherine Hagaman, tell us about your role in this EAR project, and also more about the Office of Resilience. Some people might not be aware of that name.
Sure. So the Office of Resilience is a relatively new office, but it grew out of sustainability efforts within the county. We're involved in the EAR process in so much as climate change is a central shaping force for Miami-Dade County, especially over the long term. But one of the central projects that the Office of Resilience is working on is creating a resilience strategy through the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative, which is a global initiative with cities from Jakarta to London to New York, many American cities. And so as part of creating that resilience strategy, which is more focused on shocks and stresses like hurricanes and sea level rise, we've had a lot of community input, and not surprisingly, most of the same issues come up. Transportation, always on the tip of people's tongues, climate change as well as part of that process. So we're part of the EAR process. We work on the same forum very closely, but we also have a few other initiatives going on. My role within the office is mostly focused on sea level rise.
Well, considering that Miami-Dade is listed as the most vulnerable county in the entire United States as far as sea level rise, do you think the constituents and the people who went to your public hearings really are aware of that? And what is really being done that's taking that very seriously?
Yeah, we do hear a lot of concern about sea level rise. If you look at national polls about climate change, constituents in Miami-Dade are some of the most informed nationally around the issue. So I think people are aware. Obviously, our whole job is trying to make sure that people are more aware and take it more seriously, but we do have a good baseline of understanding. We're trying right now in the county to make sure that climate change is factored in to everything that the county does. So with the planning process, with the SMART plan, which Aileen will talk about, with our capital improvements. And that's a lot of that is sort of behind the curtain policy work and changing, how we go about building and making things in the county.
I see that you say in the material you gave us that sea level is projected to rise 3 feet by 2070. According to many, it's going to rise more and sooner. I mean, there are different estimates on that and different projections.
Yeah, there definitely are. There's a range of projections, and unfortunately, the situation continues to evolve as the pollution continues. So we have to we have a formal process of bringing local scientists together, a consortium of scientists from the Army Corps, the local universities, and periodically they update our official projections, which take into account our local factors like the Gulf Stream and our land. And so we have a formal process where we get feedback from our local scientists, basically sort of tuning what you get at the global level with the IPCC to what's locally specific for us. So those are the projections that we use for our planning process, and we update them as the new science comes out.
Well, let's bring in Aileen Bouclé. I'd like to know where things stand because it's a little confusing. Doug Hanks wrote an article in the Herald a few days ago about the SMART Transit Plan, which stands for Strategic Miami Area Rapid Transit Plan, and expanding rail services. Is that happening? Is that not happening?
Well, yes. Actually, we are currently in the environmental phase of the SMART Plan documentation. What happened last year in 2016 is the Transportation Planning Organization set a vision to prioritize transit and provide mobility to the residents in Miami-Dade County and also visitors that we have here. We want to not just set a vision but adopt a plan. So the SMART Plan was unanimously adopted as the transit plan for Miami-Dade County. This year, the board is preparing a finance plan for our next phase funding, including right-of-way acquisition, design, and construction, which we will be anticipating after the environmental documents are approved. And so I will be working with my colleagues here very closely on the EAR process, because the transportation element is a major component, critical component of the comprehensive master plan. And as it's reviewed and evaluated, we want to make sure that the long-range transportation plan is consistent with the transportation element and comprehensive master plan of Miami-Dade County.
Aileen Bouclé, could you also tell us how much integration is as far as planning with your role in the Metropolitan Planning Organization, as far as the tri-county, even the four-county area, and the importance of cooperation between those entities?
Sure, absolutely. It's critical. In fact, we have all of the logos from Monroe County to Palm Beach are all on our SMART plan and all endorsing the SMART plan, because we do live in a larger region, well above 5.5 million people. And so we have a lot of residents from Broward and Palm Beach even that travel into Miami-Dade County during AM, PM peak travel. So we want to make sure that the transportation network is seamless and is working in the way it needs to. So a lot of the SMART plan corridors do cross jurisdictional boundaries beyond Miami-Dade, beyond Broward, into Palm Beach, and also down south into Monroe County. So they are critical partners for us, and we are engaging on a regional effort, and that is a part of the SMART plan. We like to call it, it's Miami-Dade County SMART plan, but it's really a SMART region. It's a plan for a SMART region.
I have more questions on the SMART plan, but in the meantime, I wanted to ask this to make this clear. You have a survey online for us to take to show, our concerns and whatever. Does that mean that people outside of Miami-Dade can also take that survey?
Yes, I think it's online.
Okay. So, all right.
We'll have more information about that.
Yeah, we will. We're going to take a short break. We're talking about the Miami-Dade County Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources campaign to engage county residents and visitors in shaping the future of the county through the review and update of the Comprehensive Master Plan. So let's take this break, and we'll be right back.
And we're back. It's today's Topical Currents. Joseph Cooper, Bonnie Berman. And we continue our discussion about the Miami-Dade CDMP with Jerry Bell, Catherine Hagaman, and Aileen Bouclé. If you'd like to join in with a comment or question, you're certainly welcome. That number, 1-800-743-9576. 1-800-743-9576. Also email, that's radio@WLRN.org. radio@WLRN.org.
And the elements that are addressed in the master plan are everything you can think of, including, housing as well, and coastal management, intergovernmental coordination, educational component, economic and community health, and design. So it's everything, and in addition to what we've been talking about. So Aileen Bouclé, let's go back to SMART. The reason I think I was a little confused is because, is it going to expand the rails? Because it looks like the mayor wants to do it with bus routes as opposed to rails. So is it going to expand the rails, or it's not?
So currently right now, the environmental documents for each of the 6 corridors are looking at light rail and or appropriate technology, including bus rapid transit, light rail transit, metro rail at grade, and elevated. All of those modes are currently under study for all 6 corridors. And so what we are anticipating...
Should we list the 6 corridors?
Sure. So we have 6 rapid transit corridors, which are the Beach Corridor, the East-West Corridor, the Kendall Corridor, North Corridor, Northwest 27th Avenue, the Northeast Corridor, which is similarly close to the Tri-Rail alignment on FEC, and the South Corridor, which is the South Dade Transitway. These 6 corridors are part of the rapid transit network of the SMART Plan. In addition, we have a network of express buses called the BERT system, where we're going to be offering express bus service on mostly all of the highways, limited access facilities that we have here in Miami-Dade County. So you have those 2 components of the SMART Plan moving forward. And as I mentioned earlier, all 6 of the rapid transit corridors are currently under study. We will be, those studies will select a mode or a technology and an alignment and develop the station locations and conceptual design cost estimates. So as the process moves forward, more of the plan will be refined.
according to what the mayor said in that article, is that investing in rail could very well be investing in a very antiquated system. You're tied down where those rails are. With the technology for self-driving vehicles, be they cars, buses, whatever, you might really be limiting and paying more by putting in rapid transit by rail.
And I think it's important to remember that during the project development phase, which is currently the stage that we're at, the environmental phase, really everything really should be on the table, and we need to be having a critical conversation on all possible solutions that are out there. We don't want to find ourselves at a moment in time in the future where we're ready to start construction on a project and then wait a minute, everybody take a step back and say, hey, we're not on board. We want to make sure that we have the right solution on the table, and during the project development process, you will have a lot of different discussions and levels of engagement as to what those solutions will be. But ultimately, every single corridor will have their own solution depending on what is needed along that corridor to serve the transit needs on those corridors.
I think that, most people feel that traffic and the transportation issue, really impacts the quality of life in South Florida. And so what time frame are we talking about? I mean, the mayor was talking about looking to the future with these driverless shuttles. But meanwhile, that's not now. We have problems right now. I mean, what is the time frame for SMART?
And I think that's really one of the most critical questions that we get are really, what is the time? That is the core issue that we're dealing with. It's a matter of time because everybody is experiencing delay. Everybody's in congestion. It's affecting everybody's time. So we want a solution now, but we also need to make sure that our solution carries us into the future based on our investments that we'll be making along these corridors. So one major initiative that we're going to be undertaking, the three of us together, are the initiation of implementation plans along all 6 corridors, where for the first time we're going to be actually looking at the land use, zoning, and transportation improvement at the same time. So along all 6 corridors, we're going to be looking at the various land uses to try to see if we can, for example, identify multiple business districts along the county, along these corridors, such that we could reestablish the travel pattern or change or redistribute the travel pattern in the morning and evening, because right now our travel patterns are very set. We have one major central business district, we have major medical districts, but we have opportunities to expand that in these corridors. So we're going to be working very closely on that land use component and seeing how introducing other land uses could help disperse travel and also create economic opportunity along the county. So, that's a unique effort we're undertaking, and we're very excited to do that.
Well, if you have questions about transportation, housing, agriculture, and environmental concerns, please give us a call, 1-800-743-9576. This is where you can give us some ideas, 1-800-743-9576. Email radio@WLRN.org.
Jerry, talking about land use, I'd like to just talk about that for a minute, focusing on the urban development boundary. So what factors go into a decision to expand that boundary?
Okay. One thing we look at is land supply. So land supply and various land uses. So we look at how much land we have available within the urban development boundary for housing, how much land we have for employment, for various business uses. So we try to maintain a 15-year supply of land for these various uses within the urban development boundary. So that is one of the factors that we would look at in evaluating the UDB and whether or not an expansion is warranted.
I read that where and how we grow, given that our population is projected to grow from the current 2.7 million people to over 3.1 million people by 2040. Okay. So if by 2030 the housing supply within the UDB is projected to be depleted, does that mean automatically that the UDB is going to be expanded?
It would not mean automatically. As we go through this EAR process, one thing we might look at is if we channel more growth along, say, these smart corridors. So we look at how, there's a potential to increase densities within the urban development boundary if services are in place. So we could look at, so it doesn't necessarily mean, it's certainly a factor. One thing we do want to look at is how much land we have to accommodate the population growth, but there are different, there are different scenarios that we can look at within the urban development boundary as well. So So that doesn't necessarily mean that. This is really an opportunity to go back, recalibrate the plan, update the data and analysis, look at where we're at now, look at where we're at with land supply, and look forward into the future.
And what about the issue of affordable housing?
Right, that's a major issue, of course. That's one thing that we will be addressing as part of the EAR. That's another factor that we look at in terms of the urban development boundary, because land supply, the supply of land for housing, is a factor in housing cost. So that will be a consideration as far as that.
Again, that survey, so anybody can take it in this
Correct.
4-county area. And to take the survey, where do they go?
Okay, they can Google. Probably the easiest way is just to Google Miami-Dade County EAR 2018. We do have a...
I took it the other day. It's about 10 minutes.
Right.
Yeah,
it's a cool survey. It's got some interesting graphics, and we try to show some different scenarios for how development could occur. So, yeah, I'd encourage everybody to take it. We've gotten a great response for it. We've had about 800 so far. So it'll be up through November, so we look forward to getting a lot more response to that.
All right. Again, our number is 1-800-743-9576. Do you have no concerns about the urban development boundary and housing and transportation and education and what else? Land use? We're sure you do. 1-800-743-9576. Our email is radio@WLRN.org. radio@WLRN.org.
Tell us, Jerry Butler, some of the ideas and the that you heard in the June public hearings. Anything that opened your eyes, or that just kind of, or do you just tally, well, so and so there's so much interest in transportation, so much in housing, so much in agriculture, and what's really fruitful out of those meetings?
I think the range of issues, and I think the fact that climate change really is on a lot of folks' minds. We did get a lot of input on that. I think there's a lot of discussion about the urban development boundary. It tends to be kind of a hot button issue, and one thing that we are looking at as part of this is the urban expansion areas, which are areas where, because the urban development boundary basically outlines the area where urban development can occur between now and under the current planning horizon, now and 2020. So as we do this EAR, we're going to be pushing that date out to 2030, but we also have urban expansion areas, which are areas where we identified where if an expansion of the urban development boundary is warranted between, say, 2020 and 2030, these are the first areas that should be looked at. So that's another area that did get a lot of input. The mayor recently established a task force to evaluate the 4 urban expansion areas that we have. So that's generated quite a bit of discussion, because I think there are a variety of different interests. You've got property rights interest as well as environmental interests. So that tends to be a controversial issue, and a lot of the input at the hearings was about the urban development boundary.
But
from both sides.
These surveys and the public hearings, in essence, really have no clout to them. They're just input for you to begin to make plans for the future.
I'd say I wouldn't say they don't have any clout. I think what they do is they help inform us, because we're at the outset of this process. The EAR is going to be going on throughout 2018. We anticipate it being adopted toward the end of 2018, and then after that we're going to go in and do the amendments to the plan. So I think that this kind of front-end input is going to be very important, both in directing how we conduct the study, what the issues are that we're looking at, the areas that we're going to be making recommendations. So I feel that the recommendations that we make are going to have to be based on a lot of these public input and a lot of the ideas that we're hearing. So they will have clout.
Let's take a telephone line or two, call or two, 800-743-9576. We have Phil in Homestead. Phil, you're up. Hi.
Hey, how are you? I'm in the Redlands, right on the edge of this rapid transit system, and I actually report for a local newspaper and did an article recently on it. My question is, it's going to be twofold. One is going to be about the rail, the possibility of the rail, and the second question is going to be about the urban development line. Most of us feel down here that the real solution is going to be rail, because I know in certain cities like Philadelphia, the trains can actually reach a speed of 70 miles per hour. And they regulate the traffic signals and so on accordingly. Whereas right now, to travel from Florida City, which is the southernmost point of this rapid transit to downtown Miami, can take up to 2 hours. under the present system. That's on a good day. And most of the time the buses are always having either breakdowns or air-conditioned problems. I guess here's my question. Number one, I'm understanding that the Southern Corridor the study is costing between $7 and $11 million. $7 and $11 million. That's the first question. And I guess each corridor is having a bill similar to that. And now here's the real question. The urban development line zigzags back and forth in the area of 248th Street, a little bit south, and it actually cuts into a point where it almost hits the rail line. Are there any plans eventually of moving that line? Because my understanding is when they did the study in 2006, they were talking about walking distance between a half a mile to a mile from the rapid transit, but yet the urban development line here actually touches the line on 248th Street and then runs down the center of the street as it zigzags back and forth.
Okay, let's let Jerry address some of this. Jerry?
Okay, in terms of the urban development boundary in that area, yes, you are correct. It does come fairly close in that area. That area, interestingly, is not one of the defined urban expansion areas, but one of the points of doing this EAR is to take a big picture look at the urban development boundary line, both the existing expansion areas and potential future expansion areas. There are a number of policies in the plan which direct how the factors that should be considered in evaluating moving the urban development boundary. There are some areas where, due to environmental factors, it's not appropriate, where the policies would dictate that the line should not move. So I'd have to take a look at this exact area. But one of the things that we are going to be doing as part of this effort is taking a big picture look. So we could be recommending areas for new urban expansion areas where it makes sense. So that area, I would anticipate, due to the configuration, would be, could be an area that we'd potentially look at with the urban expansion area.
How does one make sure that somebody does look at that area?
You certainly can communicate it through the survey. You also on the county EAR website, there's an opportunity to provide emails with specific requests, specific things you want us to take a look at. So I'd encourage you to go onto the website, do it either through the survey or do it by sending an email to our EAR staff. And the directions on how to do that are on the website. And you can contact me at the office as well.
How would I contact you at the office?
You can reach me at jerry.bell@miamidade.gov.
All right.
Okay, Phil. Thanks for calling.
Thanks for your
Thank
call.
you. Bye.
And we'll take a short break on the program.
Oh,
and we'll
it's
be
that
back
time.
with more.
Okay.
And we're back. It's today's Topical Currents. Joseph Cooper, Bonnie Berman. And we continue our discussion of the Miami-Dade Comprehensive Development Master Plan Review. We have Jerry Bell, Catherine Hagaman, and Aileen Bouclé with us.
Let's just take this quick email.
Well, let's get out the phone number again. 1-800-743-9576. 1-800-743-WLRN. Also email, it may be faster, radio@WLRN.org.
Okay, Terrence wants to know about bicycling and parks, if that's being addressed in the master plan and the EAR report.
Yes, it is.
Yes,
it is. We're going to be addressing that both in our evaluation of the transportation element, and it also cuts across. One thing in the CDMP is there's a lot of interrelatedness. So in land use, one thing we look at is making sure that we're providing adequate access, adequate bike areas, and different parts of the county. So yes, it will be definitely addressed.
Okay.
Also addressed is agriculture land, and I was wondering what the plan will how it will address the rising property values in South Miami-Dade County, where much of the agriculture is, and how it can be pricing farmers out of existence.
Right. Well, that's a big challenge. One thing that is important for us in the plan is to address the viability of the agricultural industry and make sure that we're setting the stage for maintaining agriculture. It's a major economic impact. So there are a number of policies in our land use element that we look at, and ways that we, as we go through this process, can seek to support agriculture.
I wanted to ask you, Catherine, and then we'll take some more calls and emails about this 100 Resilient Cities program. So I see it's funded by the Rockefeller Foundation.
That's
Rockefeller Foundation. And so what is its purpose?
Yeah, so I think the purpose of the 100 Resilient Cities, there's a number of purposes, but essentially I think the Rockefeller Foundation took the perspective, especially after Sandy, that all of these urban areas...
Sandy, the major
Sandy.
storm, whatever
it was. Hurricane Sandy that hit New York and the area, that a lot of our future growth globally is in urban centers, and a lot of the stresses that the urban centers are experiencing are universal in some ways, so they take on different forms. So the Rockefeller Foundation has dedicated a lot of resources to helping different cities globally work through a pretty systematic process to identify what are the shocks that we should worry about and what are the stresses that we have to deal with. And so those shocks are the things that hit you quickly, like a hurricane, and the stresses in our case are things like pronounced poverty, lack of affordable housing,
right,
a strained transportation system. And so the Rockefeller Foundation's lending resources and connecting global experts and cities peer-to-peer to think about ways to, recognize those challenges explicitly so that our planning efforts are built around not just sort of getting through those moments, but really thriving as much as we can.
And back to our calls, we've got Jasmine in Hialeah. Jasmine, you're up. Hi.
Hi, I know I'm going to speak about the same old, but I don't really have any hope for the future of public transportation. I mean, when we got, I want to use a nice term, when we got messed over with that half-cent tax that was never used for public transportation, I mean, I was totally surprised back then, but not today. The transportation system, the public transportation system is such a mess. And I go to New York sometimes, I go to Chicago sometimes, and I see how much more convenient it is. But honestly, I think what the powers that be, what they're trying to do, I think is just lip service. And I really don't have any hope for it to get any better.
Okay, let's see who can address that.
She's referring to
the
the 2002 voter referendum for a half-cent
it was a 0.5% tax increase.
Well, I guess what I can share in the year and a half that I've been here, I can tell you what I've observed. A vision was set by the Transportation Planning Organization in 2016 and adopted the SMART Plan. And in 2016, the environmental phase was authorized and funded in full. So for the first time in decades, we have a priority one funded in environmental, a transit plan here in Miami-Dade County. So we're in active planning for a transit, increasing transit and mobility. And just last month in June, the Transportation Planning Board voted to allocate $30 million a year over a 30-year period starting in 2023, when the environmental right-of-way and design would more or less be finished, where construction would be started. So really, from my perspective, what I've seen from the board unanimously is the setting of a vision and a funding and putting money behind it, so that we're in active project development and we have our projects in the pipeline and we're moving forward. So I think that's the first time that we've had this in decades. So I do see a lot of movement from that perspective that I can share with everybody.
Yeah, but I do think that $30 million just doesn't sound like much. I did read part of the plan of some of the transportation that they're developing, and it still doesn't sound like it's enough. I live in North State, way west. They're supposedly going to build that major mega mall really a stone throws away from my house. And I'm like, and there's very little, and there's no public trains or anything expected to be built towards that way. And I'm like, this is going to become a bigger nightmare than it already is. And I think we need not $30 million, but billions of dollars to really put the public transportation system up to where it should be.
Jasmine, I just want to ask you a question. Are you going to take the survey? Do you think you can have an impact?
I'm a cynic. I don't think I could have an impact. I'm being perfectly honest.
Well, I ask you that, and this is for our panel, because I think a lot of people feel that way, that they can't have an impact. Jerry?
And they feel that the county commission is going to do what it wants to do.
Exactly,
anyway.
And not take their input to heart.
I mean, I voted for that, that 0.5% tax that many years ago, and, look what that got us. So
I will say that our effort in terms of the EAR and in terms of how we're looking at the CDMP is really based upon a very robust public involvement process. And the reason is because we want to take the public's input into consideration. We want to take it very seriously. It will have an impact. I think it's important now because we're really at the outset of this planning process. So it's not where we're coming in at the end with the recommendations already built in place. We don't have the recommendations yet. We're just at the very outset. So we're trying to get as many ideas out there on the table. We're going to try to pull them through the process. We will try to have them reflected in the recommendations and then have them reflected in the actual amendments to the CDMP. So I will say that my division, the planning division, is going to make the best effort possible to get as much input throughout the process and to pull these inputs into the recommendations. And I think it's important because the CDMP, as we've said, really kind of sets a stage. It sets a stage for the land development regulations. It sets the stage for a lot of the capital planning and a lot of the policy decisions moving forward. So the effort and the intent is to really build this process based on as much public input as possible, and and carry that moving forward.
And on the transportation side, regarding the SMART plan, we have a dedicated website, www.miamismartplan.com. I encourage you and all of your listeners to go online and go on that website, participate in the upcoming workshops and public meetings that we have along any of the corridors or all of them if you can, and reach out to us with your concerns. The level of funding that I mentioned earlier, the $30 million, is just part of an initial allocation, and it's really our first efforts towards putting together a funding plan that cannot be accomplished alone. In order for us to seek funding at the state and federal level, we need to have our own skin in the game, and we need to have our own local funds on the table, and that's the first step in building a funding plan. And so that's the initial step that's been taken, and by no means has it ended there. We will be seeking federal and state funding partnerships and looking at public-private partnerships along the corridors, as well as how the real estate or the land use is being developed along the corridor, so that we can have a sustainable model, unlike how it may have been planned in prior years. I think what you're hearing today from not just my board, the Transportation Planning Board, but the BCC, is really unanimously put together the land use and the transportation component along these 6 corridors to have a sustainable land use, so that we can have a permanent feeder pattern of riders in the system and sustainable land use from all perspectives: residential, recreational, affordable housing. That's all needed to make these successful corridors.
Jasmine, thank you very much for calling.
Thank you.
Okay. We're speaking about the Comprehensive Master Plan for Miami-Dade County and the EAR, which stands for the Evaluation and Appraisal Report. We're going to take our last break, and we'll be right back.
And we're back. It's today's Topical Currents. Joseph Cooper, Bonnie Berman, and we continue our program about the Comprehensive Development Master Plan review that's going on in Miami-Dade, but that also affects our entire region, of course. Jeanette in West Palm, you're up. Hi.
Hi.
Speak
I'm
up.
calling because I was wondering about if any hydrology studies would be performed. As we know, with sea level rising, we've had intrusion of salt water into the sources of water, fresh water, drinking water along the coastline. And another major area of replenishment for our aquifer, the Florida aquifer, is the water that runs down through the Everglades. And when you urbanize and you push west, you change the patterns of water flow. And as we become more populous, as probably salt water intrudes into our aquifers along the coastline, making it undrinkable, is that going to be taken into account at the same time as all the other factors?
Catherine?
Sure. So I can speak more to what's happening in Miami-Dade, but I know that there's an equivalent process in West Palm. But in Miami-Dade, we continually have hydrology studies ongoing by the South Florida Water Management District, our U.S. Geological Survey, and here our local water and sewer department. So we have constantly updating that line that you mentioned where the salt water meets the fresh water, and that line does shift with sea level rise, and we have seen it shift. But we monitor it very, very closely so that we can change our operations and also factor into our long-term water management plans. We just finished a big study with the RAND Corporation helping us think long-term, how do we manage water so we best preserve that freshwater drinking resource as long as possible. But just to add a point to it, we obviously don't want to go down this road any sooner than we have to, but we can treat the water to desalinate it if it becomes salty. Obviously, that's more expensive. It takes more energy. We want to postpone that as long as possible. But that's definitely front of mind for us in Miami-Dade in terms of how we manage water, and is thought of very explicitly in the planning process.
Okay, Jeanette, thank you very much for
It'd be
calling.
pretty strange in an area that gets 60 inches per rain per year would be salinating water.
I know.
It's pretty outrageous to think of.
Agreed.
We have an emailer, and he's wondering why there's no fast bus to Miami Zoo from downtown Miami or other tourist attractions like Fairchild Gardens. Why does Tri-Rail only run every 2 hours during the weekends? Why don't we add a tax for transit to everybody's paycheck to underpin it? Why does it feel unsafe at all times catching buses at government centers? Why do the majority of buses from the beach go over 395? Why is there no fast lane for buses? What plans are being made?
Well, Eileen, you can wrap that up in about 2 minutes.
There you go.
I'll certainly try. Core part of the SMART plan does include express bus service, and I think some of the routes that in fact may actually be online before the end of the year will be servicing some of the locations that were mentioned on the email, specifically the southern routes that will be taking up the turnpike. So we have 3 routes coming on board, an express bus route on the turnpike starting from the southern point of the county going up north. We will also be having express bus route service from the southwest, southeast area, southwest quadrant of the county through 874 and 878. We will be running these express bus services on the shoulders for now, but the goal is to have a dedicated bus lane, express bus lane, also on the east-west corridor emanating from the Dolphin Park and Ride on Northwest 12th Street by the Turnpike Interchange, and also at FIU. Before the end of the year, MDX has committed an express bus route. These will all be new service, express service that it's not currently available right now, and we know just from the 95 express bus service alone that started after the 95 express project was opened, on that corridor alone, we had a 300% increase in transit ridership. So we hope to gain significant ridership, express bus ridership, very quickly on these limited access facilities.
Just one other thing he brought up. I mean, I won't go. I remember a few others, but the one I'm wondering is every 2 hours the Metro Rail goes on the weekends. Is that?
He was talking Tri-Rail.
I mean the Tri-Rail.
Well, I'm happy to undertake discussions like this more offline. That is another entity that's Tri-Rail, but I think it's largely demand based, and I know that they try to be as responsive as possible to their customers. But maybe offline I can just going online to Tri-Rail and posting those kind of comments to try to see how they can get more service on the weekends. But I know it's very demand oriented, and maybe they don't have the demand on the weekends that they have weekdays to maintain that same level of service.
Okay.
And next up we have Carol in West Kendall. Carol, you're up. Hi.
Hi. Hello.
Go ahead.
Yes, I basically live in West Kendall, and I work in that. And I would like to know, I make fairly enough so that I don't need the public transit, but I did commit for a month to using it, and it's horrible. I cannot depend on it. The buses take longer than the car. The Metro Rail is not on time every time, whenever it is on time. Mower is pretty much a joke. So what incentive would I get from actually living there and working on downtown from all of this investment when most of the routes pass through the neighborhoods that need it but not want to use it? I mean, I don't need to use the public service, but I would love to use it.
Okay.
Certainly. So Kendall, it has the Kendall corridor is one of the 6 rapid transit corridors, and what we're looking at, that environmental study is being led by the Florida Department of Transportation, and again, all modes are being looked at from Metro Rail, extension on the Kendall corridor to bus rapid transit and or light rail. So all the modes are being looked at. But the kind of bus service that was just described is on mixed vehicle lane traffic, where the buses are traveling with the vehicles on the lanes, the same congested lanes that the vehicles are on. So, of course, you're not going to have any better level of service on that bus. So what we're looking at when we say bus rapid transit is that it will be in its own dedicated lane. It will not be in mixed-use traffic lanes, so it will not be on the congested lanes that the vehicles are on. So you will have an advantage, rapid transit advantage, by using that type of bus. And those are the types of concepts that are being looked at on Kendall Drive right now.
Okay, Carol.
Okay,
Thank you.
for your call.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Ryan in Davie. Ryan, your turn. Hi.
Hello. I was wondering about this is one of my favorite topics on the show, by the way. And I was wondering when a new zone is expanded to the urban development zone. When a new section is zoned available for urban development, are all the zoning released at the same time? Also, is it usually, when this usually happens, do developers tend to swoop up and grab all that land, or is there a way for, individuals to grab some of that land that might be higher valued in the future?
Well, I can say, first off, the urban development boundary does not move that often. We have every 2 years, and the odd number of years in May, we have a cycle where private applicants can apply to amend the urban development boundary to move that line. I believe it has not been moved since about 2006, so it's fairly infrequently. This EAR process, which happens once every 7 years, is an opportunity to go in and as I said, take a big picture look at it. So there might or might not, I'm not sure. There could be recommendations that come out of this process or not to move that line. But I will say that it's a fairly high bar. It doesn't move that often, and again, once every 2 years, applications. And currently, we're in the May 2017 cycle to amend the urban development boundary.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Vicki has an email that says Tri-Rail no longer runs a 2-hour head time on weekends. It has a 1-hour head time on weekends for the past 2 years. So...
Well, that's 100% better then.
That's 100% better. Right. Okay.
And we'll move along to, let's see. John in Miami, you're up. Hi. We're short on time, John. Hi.
Oh, yeah, just one quick comment. I've been lived here all my life, and I think one good way to get some real public input in terms of the urban development boundary line is to put it up for a vote. People who care about it can come and vote, make that a binding vote, and if they vote no, to not move it, then it shouldn't be moved. And I think everybody knows that it needs to not be moved. Okay, for so many reasons, it's not enough time to elaborate. But if you're going to do anything, move it east, not west. It sounds to me like the way some of your people that are talking, it's almost like a done deal that there's going to be some westward expansion. So if you really want public input, put it to a vote and let the public decide whether they want that line moved or not. I can almost guarantee you the vote's going to be no, not to move it.
Jerry?
That's my own comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John.
Okay. I will say that it does require a supermajority or a 2/3 vote of the Board of County Commissioners to move the line. And I certainly didn't want to give the impression that we have any, we're at the outset of this planning process, so we have no predisposed ideas as to whether the line should move or not as part of this process.
That's Jerry Bell. He's the Assistant Director of Miami-Dade County Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources in the Planning Division. Also with us today was Catherine Hagaman, the Program Manager of Miami-Dade County Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources, Office of Resilience. And we were also speaking with Aileen Bouclé. She's the Executive Director of the Transportation Planning Organization. And we were discussing the Miami-Dade Comprehensive Development Master Plan, and you can take this survey for the Evaluation and Appraisal Report, EAR. Just Google EAR2018 or go to miamidade.gov and look for the survey to fill it out. Also, you can look more about the SMART Plan at miamismartplan.com.
And there's beach corridor public hearings on Tuesday.
Yes, do you want to give those?
Yes, we're having Miami-Dade County will be having a public meeting tomorrow for the beach corridor from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Culner Center.
Which includes both the Miami and Miami Beach sides of the bay.
Yes. And then the second workshop will be Thursday, July 27th at the New World Trade Center in Miami Beach.
No, the New World Center.
New World Center.
It's where the
sorry.
New World
Yep.
Symphony is. It's the
Yes.
New World Center on Pennsylvania Avenue in
Yes.
Miami Beach. Okay. Thank you for being with us.
Of course. My pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks for listening. Apologies to those callers we couldn't get to. We just didn't have the time. And so we wrap up today's Miami-Dade Planning Edition. It was produced by Richard Ives, technical direction from online content producer Jason Zamka, and Polly Landis is associate producer. Remember, it's easy to download free audio archives of each program at our website. That's WLRN.org. We also have pics and links at the Topical Currents Facebook page, as well as the iTunes podcast. Tomorrow's program is a repeat broadcast of our What Will You Regret When You're Old program. Many listeners enjoyed that one. Think about your own life. What regrets might you carry into your senior years?
What regrets have you carried, Joe?
I cannot. I will take the Fifth Amendment here.
Okay.
Joseph Cooper and Bonnie Berman, thanks for making public radio your companion today. Stay tuned for Here and Now next.